There are a lot of things that you don't necessarily know when you're getting ready to take your boat through the Panama Canal. You don't really know if you're going to be tied up to another boat. You don't really know if it's going to be a 1 or a 2 day transit. You don't have any idea who your advisor is going to be or if you're going to have an assistant on board. What is something that you do know, though, is that you're going to have to feed whoever it is who's on your boat. Hi, I'm Nika Waters, and welcome to the Boat Galley Podcast. I'm talking about our recent Panama Canal transit, and specifically the food that I prepared for that trip. Today's episode of the Boat Galley Podcast is sponsored by Roam Devices. Their Marine Monitor is a premium boat monitoring system that allows you to stay informed with what's happening on your boat while you're ashore. It's just $3.49 for the hardware and $5 a month. Never be caught off guard by a failing battery or burnt-out bilge pump. Your boat will text you as soon as anything starts going wrong. The Roam Devices app shows a real-time view of your boat's status and location with an awesome built-in remote anchor alarm. RoamDevices.com. Never worry about your boat from afar again. Use coupon code BOATGALLEY for an exclusive 5% discount. I'm sorry about the noise. We're actually on passage to French Polynesia, and we're zooming along at about 7 knots in 15 knots of wind and a beam reach, so it's pretty loud. Sorry. Transiting the Panama Canal. A bucket list item for a whole lot of people, and as you get closer to it, a lot of the things that you need to have start to press on your mind. We worked with an agent during our recent Panama Canal transit, and he shared with us a number of requirements that are required for any boat going through the canal. A lot of these requirements, other than the things that we needed, like lines and fenders and those kinds of things that we needed to have for the boat, but a lot of the requirements actually revolved around the comfort of the canal advisor. The Panama Canal provides an advisor for each pleasure boat going through, and the advisor is not a pilot. They don't take control of your vessel. You're in charge of the boat, but the advisor needs to be on board. It's a canal employee. So we needed to provide shade for our advisor, a working marine toilet. We needed sealed bottled water, and we needed hot meals. Bottled water is easy enough to purchase. It's not particularly fun to think about that just insane amount of single-use plastic that entails, but easy enough to take care of. A case of bottled water in the store in Cologne was $5, not a problem. Feeding people, that's part of my nature. So what was the concern, actually? Well, it was stressed more than once, not only from our agent, but also in talking to other cruisers, is that if an advisor is not satisfied with the food or the water on hand, it was well within their rights and expectations that they could place an order for delivery of said items, all at our expense. Friends had talked to another cruiser who had their advisor not happy with a provided meal and actually chose to order food from land delivered while they were on Lake Gatun. The total cost of that for that Uber Eats was over $700. To say that I was a little bit stressed about this might be an understatement. This transit was already a budget buster. The 2-day affair, it wound up being 2 days for us to go through the canal, was already closing in just to do that on what we usually spend in a month. I didn't have any desire to add some other big number to that expense. But the lack of details stressed me out. What kind of food is expected, other than hot? I've heard from other people that their agents told them that the meals required meat. We didn't have that pointed out to us. What if an advisor is a vegetarian or has celiac disease or is deadly allergic to garlic? Especially challenging for us from the mental standpoint was the hot requirement, because temperatures in Panama at this time of year, we went through the canal in early January, they hover between 80 and 95, with a humidity regularly pegging in the low 90% range. All we want to eat is cold things, like sandwiches or salads, nibbles. Sometimes we don't even want to eat at all. Shifting my mental game was a big part of this. And then there's also the space and time conundrum. The first and last couple hours of this transit would be really busy ones for all of us. And all of us had on-deck jobs to do in the locks, meaning there wasn't anybody free to be working in the galley, not cooking, not cleaning up. Our advisor, as we heard the day before, was coming on board right around 3. Did we feed him lunch? Did we feed him dinner? Do we need to feed him both? When was he going to want to eat? Right as he got on board? After we went through the locks? What did I need to be prepared for? There's not a ton of information out there. Blog posts and videos that we watched before we went through to try to get a sense of what a canal transit looks like, they were remarkably light on any details or advice around the food thing. A general question posted on the local WhatsApp group got me a couple of helpful responses with some detailed menus, and a couple other replies that didn't help me a whole lot, like the one that said that this was an outdated requirement that needs to change. The fact remained, we're traveling on a much smaller boat than a lot of people, with a far smaller refrigerator. When people say to make up meals ahead of time and put them in the refrigerator, I just didn't have that luxury. So I took a big breath, planned 3 meals with alternatives if we needed, things that I could pull out of my hat at the last minute if the advisor was not happy, and I got to work. So I needed meals that could be prepared either ahead of time or could easily be made last minute with a minimum of fuss. We were looking at lunch/dinner or both the first day, and then breakfast and lunch on the second day. What our advisor ate, well, that's what we would eat too. Many cruisers that we know opt for paper plates and plastic silverware because they figure once they get to the other side, they're going to have access to trash. We prefer to reduce the garbage that we generate, and that meant lots and lots of dishwashing and drying and putting away. But at least the dishes, we could put them in the sink to deal with later. And actually, water wasn't a big concern because we loaded up on water before we left Shelter Bay, and when we knew that we were going into a marina on the other side at La Playita. So day 1 was a Sunday. We'd be picking up the advisor, as mentioned earlier, at 3, which is a bizarre time for eating, but maybe not, I don't know. I figured that it was probably better to make sure that the food was ready on arrival, so I made a lasagna, hot, after breakfast, put it in the oven, and after we ate our lunch, timing it to be done by about 3:30. And it could stay in the switched-off oven until we needed it. It would stay plenty warm. We'd taken out our cooler bags and purchased a couple of bags of ice as one of the last things that we did before leaving the dock. Water bottles and 1 bag of ice went in the cooler that stayed in the cockpit, and the second bag of ice was stashed in the better insulated cooler backpack in the hopes that that ice would last for the second day. And it did. Good thing. I worried about everyone trying to eat at the same time. One of the things that I had seen people talk about, particularly people on catamarans or larger monohulls, was, everybody sits around a very nicely set table and everybody eats at the same time. That's a little challenging on our boat, for sure. But that turned out really not to be an issue. Advisor number 1, Alfredo, he chose to eat fairly soon after getting on board, just as we were heading into the approaches of the Gatun locks. And the rest of us, we were still full from a big lunch. And actually, it was too hot. We weren't interested in eating right now. Alfredo also really liked being offered cookies and coffee an hour or so later when we were waiting for the commercial ship that was ahead of us to motor into the 3rd lock chamber. He pronounced the lasagna delicioso. I have to say I was probably hovering a little bit. And he also confirmed the story. If he hadn't been happy or liked what I fed him, he would have ordered food to be delivered. I would have pulled out a few other things to see if he'd like it before I would let that happen, but wow. Day 2. Things that I had thought about and discarded ahead of time included cold fruit and pastries, not hot, pancakes, way too individual. Remember, there were 5 of us on board plus the advisor. Make-ahead breakfast burritos, which was a great idea from my friend Brianne on Agora, but we don't have enough fridge space. Granola and yogurt, nope, not hot. Well, and then when we went to the grocery store and there was a buy one, get one deal on brioche rings, that cinched it. I would be making French toast casserole for breakfast with pineapple and Canadian bacon. Let's bring a taste of Vermont in with April's maple syrup. Bea and Jules helped me tear up the brioche into the baking pan the day before so the bread could dry out a little bit. I'd finish up the rest of the preparations in the morning before the advisor came on board. Lunch, I'd see if he wanted a black bean and corn salad, going with the not hot, so maybe he'd say no, or pasta with garlic and beans. Advisor number 2, Guillermo, was left on the boat about a half an hour before we were expecting him, but luckily I had coffee all ready, and he was very happy to wait over an hour to eat breakfast, which we all ate actually roughly at the same time. And there was plenty of time as we motored along Lake Gatun for leisurely cups of coffee and taking care of the washing up. He chose the pasta lunch, asking for it to be served around 12:30. By his estimation, and according to our track, we would be at the Pedro Miguel locks by 1. Again, none of the rest of us were hungry for lunch at that point. He asked for seconds. I'd say it was a hit. That pasta with garlic and beans is definitely a family favorite. It's good hot, cold, or in between, which felt pretty perfect for the uncertain timing of when anyone else might want to eat. The rest of us hopped down below to grab a bowl on and off during the afternoon, and by the time we'd finished tying up at the marina in Panama City, that huge pot of pasta and beans was empty. No Uber Eats required. There are a few things that I learned that might be helpful for you as you're getting ready to go through the Panama Canal. Having food ready ahead of time, especially for that first meal, is helpful because you'll likely be busy. If you are doing a one-day transit, you're probably being picked up bright and early, and 3 o'clock in the morning is probably a tough time to cook. It is for me. If you're doing an overnight in Lake Gatun, you're probably picking up the advisor more in the late afternoon. But having food ready ahead of time is really nice. Don't think you all need to eat at the same time. If you want to serve not hot food, like my idea of black bean corn salad, offering an option for your advisor to choose hot, if desired, might be a good idea. But on the other hand, you definitely don't want to be a short order cook. I wouldn't say, oh, do you want this or this or this or this? 2 options are good. Snacks are welcome. Cold pineapple, other fruit, cookies, maybe chips or nuts. Neither one of our advisors was proactive in asking for food or drinks, and they had the water easily available at their feet to help themselves. But they definitely appreciated being offered food or drinks. Next time, I'd offer more frequently. There's a lot of downtime between lock chambers, and especially on Lake Gatun. I wasn't quite expecting all that time without something to be doing. It could be that the main criteria from the advisor standpoint is actually not feeling like food was an afterthought. If you put some planning in, I wonder if that isn't really the main criteria. But I'd still make sure the food was hot. Our advisor was very clear. No beer or other alcohol. Not for him and not for the captain. Not during the transit. I would strongly advise getting any dishes done and put away before you pull into your final anchorage and or marina, because I think all you're going to want to do is relax. And having a simple meal prepped ahead of time for your arrival, either at Lake Gatun or your final destination, will be a gift to yourself. I can't imagine even having the energy to go out to eat. Once we got into La Playita, we were wiped, and it was really nice to just have nibbles for dinner. I can't wait to share an anchorage with you, maybe somewhere in French Polynesia, since that's where we're headed, or somewhere else in the Pacific. And then we get to toast to our incredible good fortune at being able to live this amazing lifestyle. Thank you so much for listening to the Boat Galley podcast. We love hearing from our listeners. We love it when you let us know that we've helped you make boat life better in some way, shape, or form. And we love it when you share us with your friends, and we love it when you leave a 5-star review, because it helps other people also find the Boat Galley podcast. Have the most spectacular week.